My sister Chaya, her eyes were green. My sister Chaya, her braids were black. My sister Chaya, it was she who raised me in the house with the dirty tumble-down steps. Mother left the house at dawn when there was hardly any light in the sky. She went to shop to earn a wretched penny's worth of change. And Chaya stayed with the boys. She fed them, she watched over them. At night, when the kids got tired, she'd sing them lullabies. My sister Chaya, her eyes were green. My sister Chaya, her hair was long. My sister Chaya, it was she who raised me, and she wasn't even 10 years old. She cooked, she cleaned, she washed our little heads. But she forgot to play with us. My sister Chaya, her braids were black. My sister Chaya, with the eyes of green, died in Treblinka. And here I am in the Jewish world, the last one who ever knew her. It's for her that I write these poems in Yiddish, in these terrible days of our times. To God, God's self, she is an only daughter, and she sits in heaven at God's right hand. Music by Chava Alberstein, poetry by Binim Heller. Mein Schwester Chaya mit die grüne Augen, mein Schwester Chaya mit die schwarze Zepp, die Schwester Chaya, was hat mich erzeugen, auf smutschiges in Haus mit krumme Treppe. Die Mame ist weg von Stubaginen, wenn auf den Himmel hat es kein Geld. Sie ist weg in Kromereien verdienen, das bietet ne drobne Grosche dicke Geld. Ohne Chai ist geblieben mit die Brüder, und sie hat sie gekommen und gehielt. Und sie pflegt singen, sei die schöne Lieder, vor Nacht, wenn kleine Kinder werden mild. Mein Schwester Chaya mit die grüne Augen, mein Schwester Chaya mit die lange Haar, die Schwester Chaya, was hat mich erzeugen, ist noch nicht als gewesen, kein endliche Jahr. Sie hat geräumt, gekocht erlang das Essen, sie hat gezwungen uns die kleine Kerb. Nur spielen sich mit uns hat sie vergessen, die Schwester Chaya mit die schwarze Zepp. Mein Schwester Chaya mit die Augen grüne, a Deutsch hat in Treblinka sie verbrennt. Und ich bin in jüdische Kehle, der Same, was hat so sie gekannt. Ihr schreib ich auf Jiddisch meine Lieder, in Tag die schreckliche von unserer Zeit. Bei Gott allein ist die Abbas Jechide, im Himmel sitzt ihr beid
dein rechte Seid. Für ich schreib ich auf jedisch meine Lieder, in Tät die Schreckliche von uns verzeiht. Bei Gott allein ist sie Abbas Jechide, in Himmel sitzt ihr bei deiner rechte Seite.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our annual Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony. My name's Mary Harpley, and I'm the Chief Officer of the Greater London Authority. Thank you, Rachel and Josh, for that beautiful opening performance. Thank you, too, for joining us here at City Hall and for those joining us today online. Holocaust Memorial Day is supported by the Holocaust Educational Trust and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and serves as a poignant reminder of the senseless loss of life through war, persecution, and conflict in the name of an ideology. It is an opportunity to educate current generations about the dangers of persecution, anti-Semitism, racism, and discrimination in all its forms. Today, we remember those murdered during the Holocaust, under Nazi persecution, and in the genocides which followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. The theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is fragility of freedom. Freedom means different things to different people. But what is clear is that in every genocide that has taken place, those who have been targeted for persecution have had their freedom restricted and removed. Holocaust Memorial Day is a time when we seek to learn the lessons of the past and recognize that genocide does not just take place on its own. It is a steady process which can begin if discrimination, racism, and hatred are not checked and prevented. There is still much to do to create a safer future, and Holocaust Memorial Day is our opportunity to remind ourselves of this. I would like now to invite Andrew Boff, Chair of the London Assembly, to give his address.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Boff, and I'm Chair of the London Assembly. On behalf of the Assembly, thank you for joining us at City Hall today to commemorate Holocaust Memorial Day. Holocaust Memorial Day offers us the chance to come together to remember the tragic loss of life in the Holocaust and other genocides across the world. This year's theme, Fragility of Freedom, highlights the loss of freedom suffered through genocide. This theme allows us to reflect on what freedom means, whether that is freedom of religion, movement, or self-expression, or simply the freedom to live. History has shown us that genocides often begin by limiting what some consider to be small freedoms. Through being complacent in response to these limitations, the limit on people's freedom then grows. For survivors of genocide, it is important to remember that they may never feel truly free. They may be unable to return to their homes, and new lives rebuilt without loved ones can be another reminder of freedoms lost. While survivors might also have physical freedom, the impact of such trauma and suffering leaves many feeling mentally trapped. Holocaust survivor Esther Brunstein spoke of how, despite the first few days after liberation feeling joyous, there was also confusion. She said she did not know how to cope with freedom after years of painful imprisonment. We must also at this time remember those who risk their freedoms to protect others during genocides. During the Holocaust and the genocide in Rwanda, many brave people endangered their own freedom to hide those targeted for persecution or to stand up against the regimes. In Western democracies, it is often too easy for us to take our freedoms for granted. Holocaust Memorial Day reminds us that we must always value our freedoms and remain committed to ensuring the freedoms of others around the world. As we move through our lives today, I would ask that you all reflect on the vulnerable nature of freedom. What actions can we each pledge to take to strengthen and protect freedoms around the world, to ensure that we can look to a future without genocide? As I bring my remarks to a close, I want to thank all those participating in today's ceremony and say a special thank you to the Holocaust Educational Trust and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of Holocaust Memorial Day and for sharing your stories with us. Finally, thank you for coming together with us here today to remember and to support Londoners and those around the world who have suffered and survived, and with the hope of a future without such horrific crimes. Shalom Aleichem.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I now introduce Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London.
Good morning, everyone. As Mayor of London, allow me again to extend a warm welcome to you all. I'm incredibly proud that we could host again this vital event today. Can I start by quickly thanking Mary and Andrew for their words and by paying tribute to everyone at the Holocaust Educational Trust and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust for helping to arrange this service, especially to the respective Chief Executives, Karen Pollock, CBE, and Olivia Marks-Waldman, OBE. The work your organisations do educating the next generation is truly invaluable, and it's great to have you back at City Hall. I look forward not only to hearing from each of you a little later, but to continuing our partnership to promote awareness and counter prejudice. It's also a privilege to be in the company of survivors including Janine Weber, BEM, who escaped the Nazis, and Safek Vukalic, BEM, a survivor of the Bosnian genocide. I feel very fortunate to have spoken with you both a moment ago. Your testimony, which we'll have the opportunity to listen to shortly, is essential not only to preserving the past, but to building a better present and a brighter future. And I'm thankful that we could help provide this platform for you to share your important stories today. The fact is, we all have a duty to remember. But this can only be fulfilled if we continue to pass down survivors' accounts and experiences to those who follow us. They form an integral part of the historical record, and they're crucial to ensuring we never forget the origins and depredations of some of the darkest chapters in human history. This morning we come together to commemorate the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were senselessly murdered in the Holocaust, as well as to remember the victims of subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. These wicked events must never be allowed to fade from our collective memory, because a future of unity, peace, and prosperity is only possible if we heed the warnings of history, learn lessons, and are alert to the forces that threaten to fracture our societies. In London and elsewhere, we can too often take our values and way of life for granted. But as the theme of Holocaust Memorial Day and the testimony of survivors highlights, freedom is a fragile and precious thing. If we're not on our guard, it can very quickly be undermined and eroded, with devastating and even deadly consequences. Knowing this compels us to be resolute in protecting our freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom of worship, freedom of expression, the freedom to be who you are, practice your faith, and live your life as part of a community without fear of harassment, intimidation, persecution, or violence. Such freedoms are the lifeblood of London. And by and large, we're a city in which Muslims and Jews, Christians and Hindus, believers of all faiths and none, live side by side in harmony. It's what makes our city special and a beacon of inclusion and religious pluralism around the world. But in times like these, when there are people trying to drive us apart, it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can to bring people together, to build bridges, never giving in to those who seek to deprive us of our freedoms, but instead always choosing friendship over fair unity, over division, and humanity over hate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Karen Pollock, CBE, Chief Executive of the Holocaust Educational Trust. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. And thank you all for being here. And thanks to City Hall for hosting this year after year. And I hope you don't mind my saying, but I thought the music to start today's commemoration was extremely powerful and set such a perfect tone for an important gathering today. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children murdered in the Holocaust. We remember all those persecuted by the Nazis simply for who they were, and we remember the genocides that have happened since. So what was the Holocaust? It was an event unparalleled in the history of humanity, the first and so far only time a state has attempted to annihilate every member of a particular group, the Jews, anywhere they could be found. Building on a long history of anti-Semitism, the Nazis marked Jews out for persecution. Jews were taunted in schools, abused in the media, blamed for all problems in society, edged out of their professions, isolated from their friends. They were banned from attending non-Jewish schools, prevented from marrying non-Jews by law. They were seen as the mortal enemy of the German people. Eventually, Jewish communities across Europe were rounded up by killing squads, shot in fields, ravines, and villages across Europe, taken on trains from every corner of the continent to purpose-built killing centres, gas chambers. Many families and entire communities were wiped out. Eventually, as the Allies advanced, The camps were liberated, and the truth of what had been happening across Europe became public knowledge. The phrase "never again" was coined, and we still hear it ring out today. The Holocaust did not happen from nowhere. The Holocaust happened, and could only happen, as a result of 2 millennia of anti-Jewish hatred sewn into the fabric of European societies. And those 2,000 years of hatred were not erased by the Holocaust. We know that because we see it with our own eyes today. We saw it in the October the 7th massacre perpetrated by Hamas, a terrorist organization with a genocidal policy towards Jews. And we see it in the anti-Semitism that has risen horrifically since. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we talk a lot about human stories, because every single victim of the Holocaust, they were human beings. But we have to face the truth, which is Jews were not barricaded into gas chambers because they were human. Rather, humans were massacred in their millions simply because they were Jews. Today, it is more important than ever that we speak up and we speak out every time we see any form of racism. And we have seen anti-Jewish racism rise. Who could have imagined we would see such hate on our streets in this country and in our wonderful capital city? Some Jewish people are now taking extra precautions, hiding their Jewish school badges, or not wearing their kippah, their head covering, or avoiding travel into the city on weekends. When the truth of the Holocaust was made known, we all said, "Never again." Now, more than ever, it's time to show that we mean it. One of the most effective ways of safeguarding the memory of the Holocaust, and to say never again, is to hear from those eyewitnesses. Every time a Holocaust survivor shares their testimony, they are reliving the worst trauma that they've experienced in their life. Today, we have that opportunity, and it's becoming more and more precious as time goes on. We have the privilege today to hear from the indomitable Janine Weber. Before I introduce her, she wanted me to share with you that recently she had a fall. She's absolutely fine, and you'll see that for yourself, but she just might not look how she usually looks, and I wanted to forewarn you. Janine was born in Poland in 1931. She survived the Lvov ghetto and life in hiding. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Janine Weber.
Hello, everyone. Am I speaking loud enough? Yes, good. I was born in eastern Poland in a town called Lvov, which is now Ukraine. It's called now Lviv. I was born in 1932, actually, and so you makes me older than I am. I'm 91. I will be 92 in July. So I lived right in the center of the town. In 1941, the Nazis, the Germans, invaded Poland, came to Lvov. And the first thing they started doing was rounding up the Jewish men. And one day when my mother, my brother, 2 years younger, he was 7 at that time, I was 9. We heard the German police, the Gestapo, screaming, calling the Jews by very unpleasant names. And my father came running in and he said, "The Germans are after me." And my mother locked the door, and my father jumped from our second floor balcony onto the first floor balcony and hid underneath. My mother had to let the Gestapo in. They didn't find my father, and they left. And when they left, I asked my mother, why do they want my father? And my mother said, it's because we are Jewish. And you know, I had never asked myself who I was. But I became very frightened to see the police, the armed police who wanted to take away my father. Very soon we were told to leave our flat, to take a minimum, 1 suitcase. We were given a room in a small house for my parents, my brother and me. My grandmother, who used to take care of me, she too came with us. Because the intention was to send us to the ghetto, but the ghetto wasn't yet ready. And they wanted to take all the Jewish belongings. So that's why they decided to throw us out. We were there when we heard the Gestapo approaching. My parents dug a hole under the wardrobe. And when we heard them coming, we hid. That is my mother, my brother, and I. We hid in that hole. But there was no room for my father and my grandmother, and they hid in the loft. I don't know what happened to my grandmother. I heard her screaming. They found them hiding. They didn't find us, and when it was quiet, we came out of the hole, and I asked my mother, "Where is my father?" And my mother said they were shot, because, as you know perhaps, that before sending them to a camp, they would shoot people. In Lvov, they shoot everybody, including the children. They didn't find us. And then when we heard that they would be coming, again we hid this time in kennels, which was in the courtyard. We were there, and I remember holding on to my mother's arm, and my brother was holding on to her, and I saw the Gestapo approaching. I was so frightened that I didn't look at their faces. I just looked at their boots. They always had these shiny black boots. And for years, I used to have this nightmare that the boots were coming to get me. They didn't find us, and they left. Very soon, we were told to move to the ghetto. We were given a small room for my mother, my brother, and me. And my mother very soon became ill. I will tell you about the ghetto in a minute. But she became ill, and it was very dangerous to be ill in the ghetto. People were dying of hunger and lack of hygiene. And people were shot as well. And so in order to protect my mother, my uncle, her brother, carried her into the cellar. And I went to see her. She was lying on this iron bed. She didn't look at me, and she didn't talk to me. And I couldn't understand why, because my mother had always been very loving. I became so frightened and so upset that I ran out. And I saw my uncle, who said my mother had died. She died of typhus. You know, typhus can be cured if one has medication. We didn't have any. My mother was 29 when she died. So I was left with my brother. My uncle found another family, Polish farmers, to hide my brother and hide me. My brother, The daughter of that family, who was about 20, came one day with a German soldier, with an SS armed soldier, and I knew she brought him to kill us, because I knew that they were killing all the Jews, including the children. They killed my brother. They buried him alive. He was 7. He didn't want to kill me for some reason, and he told me to go to start walking. I found the family who were in the fields. I asked them for a piece of bread. They wanted to know who I was, so I invented a story. Of course, I didn't want to tell them that I was Jewish. It was too dangerous. They took me in, and they said I could help them in the house. But after about 2 or 3 months, they said they cannot keep me any longer because they found out that I was Jewish. So they bought a train ticket to go back to Lvov. I went back. I had with me the name and address of a young Polish man called Edek, or Edek, as you would pronounce. Edek was 19. He was the night watchman of a convent. When the war started, he told my uncle that if ever we needed help to find him, he will help us. So I found him. I went to his office, and he got up and told me to walk behind him. He took me to a building, put a ladder against the wall, and when I opened the door to the loft, I found my uncle, my auntie, my auntie's boyfriend, 13 Jews. Edek was hiding 13 Jews, and I was the 14th. He is a hero. He risked his life. While we were there in that loft, people would go out at night. They dug a hole under the stable's floor. And one night we all went into that hole. It was very small and fairly well organized. There were 6 planks and a bucket and chairs to sit, but there was no room for walking. So we had to take it in turn to lie on the plank or sit on the chair. We had very little food. My auntie would go at night, she would buy some food and come back the following night. It was a little easier for her because she was blonde, and people in Poland believed that all the Jews were very dark, but in my family quite a few were blonde. But I remember eating slices of dry bread with chopped up raw onions, and it was delicious. It was very, living on the ground, it's very hot, and I just used to wear my underwear. One day, after about 10 months or a year, my auntie said it was too dangerous for a child to live in a hole, and she managed to find some false papers, and we left the hole. I was taken to a convent, and of course they didn't know I was Jewish. They kept me for one night, but they said the next morning, they said it was too difficult for them to keep me because I was most likely very, very ill, and they didn't want to catch my disease. Now, let me tell you a little more about the ghetto. they were hanging people and leaving them for a few days in order to create terror and forcing us to look at them. People were dying of hunger, of lack of hygiene. People were begging everywhere. There were corpses lying around. So I felt fairly safe living in the hall with other people, but my auntie took me, as I have just said, to this convent. The next morning, they said I should go. I went to Krakow. I found another convent, and of course they didn't know I was Jewish, but you know, Catholic nuns pray a lot, and I didn't know the Catholic prayers, so I was worried that they might find out. And also, I could hardly walk because I hadn't used my leg muscles for nearly a year. So one day, when a priest arrived, and he said he had a little cottage and he could take 4 girls, I asked him if he would take me. He was very kind, but I wasn't very happy because we slept in bunk beds and I slept in a lower bunk bed. And the girl on top would wet the bed, and I was worried it might run on me, but I never wanted to complain. So one day when an elderly couple arrived, they said they would like a girl to help them in the house. I asked them if they would take me, and that is how, at 11 and a half, I became a maid. I worked for them, they had me out. I worked for another family. Of course, they didn't know that I was Jewish, so they sent me to church. I did my communion. But when I arrived at that village, I wrote to Edek to give him my address. But nobody answered, so I thought everybody was dead. But 6 months after the war, my auntie came, and she asked me if I wanted to come with her. I said yes. Of course, the people, my family, they were very surprised when they learned that I was Jewish. My auntie took me to Krakow, to a children's home for Jewish children who survived with having been hidden or false papers. But you know, after the war, there was still a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland. And people who survived, who went back to their houses or flats, unfortunately some of them were killed. So one night, we all left Poland and we went to Paris. When we arrived in Paris, my auntie said to me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go with the children? They're taking the children to Israel. Or do you want to stay in Paris, where she wanted to study at the university? We said, my cousin and I, that we wanted to be where she was. So she puts us in the children's home for French children who survived, French Jewish children, like we did, hidden or false papers. And I went to school. My language, of course, is French and English as well. I think my time is over. Yes? Okay, well, thank you very much. That's my story.
Thank you very much, Janine, from all of us. And your words remind us, as Karen said, about how important it is to hear directly from people like Janine on occasions like this. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. So now I'm going to introduce students Tomi Odeleye and Francesca Quinlan, two ambassadors who are going to share their reflections on participating in the Holocaust Educational Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project. You want to come up?
Good morning. My name is Tommy. Alongside me is Francesca, and we are ambassadors for the Holocaust Educational Trust. We took part in the Trust's Lessons from Auschwitz project as students from Townley Grammar School in Bexley last year. As part of the project, we heard from a Holocaust survivor, took part in a one-day visit to former Nazi concentration and death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau, and upon our return, we shared what we learnt with our school community. The untold stories are why I decided to participate in the project. I knew that during the Holocaust, approximately 6 million Jewish people were killed by the Nazis and their collaborators, but quite ignorantly, I failed to comprehend how colossal of an impact this is. Mothers, fathers, children, and grandparents were all stripped of their lives, identities, and forced to work in such hostile conditions, so the bare minimum we can do is make sure that they are remembered. My visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau was a particularly insightful and an experience that I'll never forget. A specific memory that will forever remain etched in my mind is seeing the barracks that were originally designed for 10 cattle, but were used to house over 700 people. Witnessing firsthand how uncomfortable and agonizing the living conditions would have been made me realize how much bravery, strength, and courage the victims must have had. Seeing the myriad of hair and shoes in the display cabinets allowed me to conceptualize just how many people were affected, especially the smallest shoes that conveyed no remorse were shown to even the youngest of people. Hearing the testimony of Holocaust survivor Stephen Frank, BEM, further illustrated to me that each victim had their own complex lives. He told us a surprisingly heartwarming story of how he developed his love for growing tomatoes due to the people who he shared his barracks with. It is so important that young people are given the opportunity to hear the testimonies of Holocaust survivors, as although they won't be able to share their experiences forever, we can ensure that their stories live on by sharing them.
After our visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau, we completed our Next Steps project to reflect and share what we had learned from our time at the camp. We decided to make a presentation about our visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau, focusing on things we were previously unaware of, such as just how severe life in the concentration camp was. We wanted our audience to know just how terrible Jews were treated in the camps, and how they were slowly stripped of their humanity by means of cutting their hair, their identification numbers, and so many other despicable acts, as well as how easy it was to have been a bystander in all of this. I believe it is so vital that we recognize that perpetrators were ordinary people just like you and me. It can be easy to let discrimination against others happen, but history has sadly shown time and time again that derogatory comments can turn into prejudice, which can fester into something much more dangerous. I cannot stress how important it is for us to notice this discrimination and create awareness so that future genocides can be prevented. As I learn more about the Holocaust and what we can do to carry on the memories of those who were murdered, I wish to pass my knowledge and those legacies on to the future generation so that they can also recognize the importance of lessons learned. The theme of the Holocaust Memorial Day 2024, the fragility of freedom, means so much to me as it is such an important message to convey. It is incredibly underestimated how easy it is for society to break down. This theme holds a very special meaning to me, as my family were victims of another terrible event when society broke down. Many members of my maternal family were killed in the Rwandan genocide simply for being Tutsi. They were hunted down by ordinary people too, friends, neighbors, and even their own family. The reoccurrence of genocide goes to show why it is all the more important to remember these events, build our knowledge of the Holocaust, and continue to keep the millions of stories alive. In Auschwitz-Birkenau, I learned how perpetrators at camps dehumanized those they held captive to the point where they did not consider them to be human beings and therefore felt justified to do the unthinkable. Yet, through all of this, many Jews still felt proud and would share cooking recipes with each other and write them down so that something of them would continue if they did not escape. The collective joy of someone reading the Torah and exchanging the small amount of food they had for a verse to be read shows how even in darkness, it is the simple things which can create unity and light. To spread love, we need to unite, enlighten, and remember. We must remember those we have lost. We must enlighten those who do not know what has been lost. But to do all this, we must unite together to say never again. We would like to thank the Mayor of London and the London General Assembly for inviting us to be here today to share our experience and reflections on why Holocaust education is so important to young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommy and Francesca. And it's wonderful to see you and others like you taking on responsibility for the retelling of these events and memories. So now I'd like to introduce Olivia Marks-Waldman, OBE, and Chief Executive of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. Olivia.
Thank you very much to the Mayor of London and all your colleagues at the London Assembly. As you've heard, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust's theme this year is Fragility of Freedom. The murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators could not have taken place without the steady erosion of everyday freedoms in the years leading up to the Holocaust. Anne Frank's freedom to education alongside her peers was restricted when she was forced to leave her public school and join a Jewish-only school. Marla Tribich's freedom of movement was destroyed when she was forced into a ghetto in Poland. And similar processes have been followed in the genocides that have taken place in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Darfur. Sokpal Din's freedom of movement was restricted when he was forced to work in the killing fields of Cambodia. And as Francesca has alluded to, Tutsis were not able even to listen to the radio freely because the propaganda was spread deliberately using hateful, dehumanizing language against Tutsis. As prejudice is normalized and then actively encouraged, even the freedom to live is taken away. On HMD 2024, we are marking the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Rwanda. On HMD 2024, we are coming together at a time when anti-Semitism across the country and the UK is at shockingly high levels. And as Karen said, many Jewish people are frightened even to wear symbols of their Jewish identity. Many Muslims are facing increasingly high levels of anti-Muslim hatred. We can all play our part in safeguarding the freedoms of our neighbours. And we can all reflect on how freedom is fragile and vulnerable to abuse. So I invite you all on Holocaust Memorial Day itself on Saturday the 27th of January to join our curated moments, which is taking place online at 7:30 p.m. And directly after, join the nation in lighting the darkness. Light a candle at 8 o'clock in the evening and place it in your window so the light spills out to the pavement and we can all collectively commemorate together and just spread a little bit more light. A flame that honours the memory of the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust and honours the memory of all those murdered in genocides that took place after the Holocaust. And it will also be a light of solidarity with people today who still face persecution and prejudice. We can all play our part in learning from genocide for a better future. And I am honoured today to be here commemorating this day with you, and also to introduce Safet Vukalic, BEM. When ethnic cleansing began in his neighbourhood in Bosnia, Safet narrowly avoided being sent to concentration camps with his father and his older brother. It's such a privilege to have heard from Janine, and a privilege now to hear from Safet, and one that I'm sure none of us take for granted. Safet, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. I'm honoured to be part of Holocaust Memorial Day Trust since 2010, and honoured to be here today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for organising this. I learned from history about Holocaust and the World Wars, but there was never that connection. It was always about numbers and remembering dates, etc. It was only really when I had the opportunity to speak to Holocaust survivors, like Janine, hearing her story today, and many others. But every time I hear that story, I see a child. And that's what hurts me, because there's so many children that have this memory and they live for the rest of their life. They might survive, they might live to tell the story. But just imagine having that story of seeing your parent, your brother, sister, neighbors killed, and then living the rest of your life with that image in your head, which is not easy to forget, and it's not something you should try to forget. It's finding ways to cope, and one of those is talking about it. Very important, not only for ourselves, but also to teach others, help others understand what happens, why it happens, and let's work towards never again. It is much easier said than actually do it. When Yugoslavia was breaking up, or rather I should say before it was breaking up, I had freedom. I was a Muslim child. I didn't think about that at all when I was going to school, because we were mixed religions, and when I played football with other children, or predominantly I'd say it was boys, I didn't think about what religion. It was about who was better. I wanted to play with them. But it was when Yugoslavia started to break up and republics started going their own way. There's a lot more to be said about it, but unfortunately there's no time for that today. It was then the language suddenly changed, of the politicians, the language in the media. And more you start to think, we're hearing the things that people have heard before. When the war broke out in Croatia in 1991, there were many people who were still saying, it's not going to happen in Bosnia, we're too mixed. The religious-wise, Orthodox Christian, Catholics, Muslim, families, friends, neighborhoods, people work together, people live together, celebrate birthdays together, celebrate religious holidays together. It's not going to happen. I had a fear that it was going to happen in Bosnia because of that. People didn't like the unity. People didn't like, or when I say people, certain people that got into power didn't like us all being together. And the only way those kind of people get what they want is to divide us. And when the war broke out in Bosnia in 1992, and I remember watching movies about Nazis and collection of people, putting people on trains and taking them away, and then you have the liberators, etc. But this was in 1992 in Europe. I watched soldiers walk down my street calling the men to come out. Now, we knew when they said all the men come out, we knew this meant Muslims, Catholics, Romans, anyone else who's not a Serb, who's not Orthodox Christian. And you think, this is not real. I was 16 at the time, and I was taller than most men. When they started walking up the road, I started walking as well. My dad, my brother. My mum called me back, and I used to say she shouted at me. She raised her voice, but she called me back and said, "You come back, you're a child, you shouldn't go." And as I never argued with my mum, I listened, and I believe that saved my life. I would not have the strength to go to live through a concentration camp, or 3, as my dad did. I went back in the house, and I stayed with my mum and my 2 sisters, and I was lucky not to be picked up, because there were many younger people that ended up in concentration camps. So on the first day when they walked up the road, we knew they were close by, because there was still, you can hear a lot of noise, you can hear shooting every now and then. We didn't know what was going on. We couldn't go up the main road to see. We just hoped for the best. I learned a few things that happened during that time, and one of those things was my dad was with a group of people, and a soldier came to them, a soldier who introduced himself and said he was from Serbia. And he said, "What happened here?" He said, "I had no choice. I had to come here. I was told to, as part of the territorial army, to get ready and go for exercises to prepare to defend Serbia, and then was told to go to a front line. I've got no idea what was happening here in Prijedor." So my dad said, "Well, there was no war here. We were patrolling our streets with mixed patrols, making sure nothing happens in our neighborhood up until last night." And my dad mentioned that my dad also was previously in the territorial army, but when the Serbian government took over the local government and local police, they asked all the territorial army people to submit any weapons that they've had, and they did. They went and signed for them. And so that soldier heard my dad's story and asked a few other questions from other people. So eventually there was a group of people being beaten up by soldiers, and my dad was called up too because of him being a member of the territorial army previously. And just as they were about to start beating my dad up, this soldier who was from Serbia, who never met my dad before, he came forward and said, "Stop this, you do not need to beat these people up." I will probably never meet that man, but I wish I could, because I would thank him. Who knows what could have happened to my dad had he gone on the ground. I've often said that soldier behaved like a soldier. Even in the army, even if you're given orders to go and collect people, let's say, as obviously wrong that is, you can still behave differently. You do not need to behave like an animal. And some people have used the opportunity that they had, and they could, and they did behave like animals. My brother was also hit by another soldier 5 times in the head. When he started bleeding, that soldier walks away. Another soldier comes to him and says, "Come with me." And he takes him close by to wash the blood off his head and bring him back to the group. So again, different type of people, even in that group of soldiers. So after the Serbian soldier intervened, when I say Serbian, from Serbia, intervened, they did stop the beating. I also learned later that one of my neighbors, who was only about 3-4 years older than me, was killed. And as far as we know, he was killed by his friend, who said to him, "What are you doing here? Go home." And as he started walking, he was shot in the back. Up until a few years ago, I remember asking his parents whether they found his body, as I knew there was only half of his body found so far. And at that point, it's still only half of the body was found. Many remains of Bosnia have still not been recovered. So that was all around June time when they were taken away. And I should actually mention, before they were taken away, on 31st of May, after the local government was taken over by the extremist Serbian party, they announced on the radio that all non-Serbs should display a white flag on their house, on their flats, and wear white armband when out about. They said this was for our own safety. We knew what that meant, and we knew where the idea they got from. I don't need to tell you this today, on this day. And then, so after they were taken away, we were trying to use our friends, neighbors, Serbs, to try and see if they can tell us where they've been taken away, what's going to happen to them. We heard they were taken to a local factory that was called Keraton. That was already prepared to be a camp. And We also heard that some of the guards would allow food to be brought in. So when we heard that, my older sister and other women from the neighborhood would just grab any food they could, get on a bike or even walk there. And some of the guards would allow the food to be brought in. They would allow even, my sister would tell me that my brother would walk up to the gate and take the food and say, yeah, we're fine. But some of the guards would actually threaten them and say, this is not a holiday camp, go away. One of my neighbors was killed taking the food to his sons. And his sons only found out much later. About 2 weeks in, during that period in the first concentration camp, my dad was taken to a second concentration camp called Omerska. Now we heard whoever's taken there is taken for a reason. Someone else asked for them. If they were official, if they were known, they were taken there to be abused and killed. And I thought, that's it, I'm not going to see my dad. There was hope before, but not after that. And I remember locking myself in the bathroom and just crying because I thought, that's it. What do I do? My brother's still in the other concentration camp, and I've got two sisters, my mum. And it's what I keep saying, this was Europe in the 90s, after never again. And eventually we heard that my dad was transferred from Omerska to a third concentration camp called Manica. And we also heard the Red Cross was there and taking registry of people. And when I heard that, I was thinking, okay, my dad will survive now. If he's survived Omerska, he will survive now. My brother was transferred from Keratim to Ternopil concentration camp. And in August 1992, there was a team of journalists who managed to, I don't know how they managed it, but they managed to press and pushed and eventually were allowed to go and film the concentration camps, because we kept saying it was concentration camps, and obviously Serbian side was saying, no, they're not concentration camps. These are camps for people who feel unsafe. They can come here and feel safe. And I knew that my dad didn't go there to be safe. He would not abandon his family, nor would my brother. So they went, by the time they got to Prijedor, the journalists, Penny Marshall, Ed Viliami, Ian Williams, and the rest of the crew from Guardian and ITN, Keratim was closed. Most people were taken, those that survived, those that haven't been killed, were taken to either Ternopil or Manica camp. Most of Omerska was also empty. There was only a handful of people left for the filming. When they arrived to Omerska, and you could see they marched people to a canteen to get them to eat, which was not happening before that day. And they kept trying to say to the journalists that they're here because of their safety. Now, when they went to Ternopil concentration camp, my brother was there at the time. There was no hiding. There was barbed wire around. There were men who were just skin and bones, and there were soldiers patrolling around, walking around. There was no hiding. These were concentration camps. And I thought, this is it. This is now British journalists who are going to tell the world there are concentration camps in Europe again. There are people being killed just because of their particular religion, because they're Muslims. And I thought, the world will do something. This is it. They're not going to now, they can't ignore it. They could have ignored us saying things, but now it's the British journalists. And the war continued for further 3 years in the middle of Europe. Now, that did make a change, and I believe my dad is alive today, and my brother, because of that, because of those journalists, nobody else, because that pressure was created, and the international community felt they had to do something now. And they agreed with the Serbian government that they will release some people, and my dad was released from Manica concentration camp. However, they had to sign a paper that they will leave Bosnia, go to Croatia first, and then they had to be accepted by a third country. They're not allowed to come back to Bosnia. And my dad was then taken by Red Cross to Croatia, and then he was brought to England, London, and he worked with Red Cross to try and get me and my mum and my sisters out. And eventually, they kept refusing papers every time we had something from Red Cross. Then the local Serbian government would say no. Eventually, coming up to December 93, so over a year later, we were told that myself and my older sister would be allowed to leave, but my mum and younger sister had to stay behind. And again, it's not a decision I want anyone to have to make. We did decide as a family that we will leave, and we hope that eventually my mum and my younger sister would be allowed to leave too. And we left on December 2nd. We went to Center Prijedor, December 2nd, 1993, met there with Red Cross, and the local Serbian police followed us, and we made our way to Croatia. We got to Zagreb on the same day. We were put in some hotel somewhere, stayed overnight, and we got to UK the next day. So it was a relatively easy trip. And we got to London. After the flight, we got to London, we got to Balham, and my dad comes out, and we couldn't talk. Happy to see my dad, but my mum and my younger sister still behind. They did, however, also eventually were allowed to leave in June 94. They came here, as well as my brother and his wife, and we've been fortunate to survive. We've been fortunate enough to be able to come and talk about this. But what hurts me is the things that could have been done to prevent all this. We could have prevented talking about the Bosnian genocide. President of Bosnia asked in 91 for UN to come in, and the countries decided against the countries. We can blame UN for all we like, but they depend on the countries that sit at the table and make those decisions. In 1995, as with all the other enclaves, safe havens, so-called safe havens, safe areas proclaimed by the UN, Srebrenica was attacked. UN had to stand aside and just watch the Serbian army come in, take the men one by one away. Mass shootings took place, mass graves who still today are being discovered in Bosnia. Over 8,000 people were killed just in a matter of a few days, just because they were Muslims in the middle of Europe. And what we had in Bosnia, since there was, international community was, I guess, pressured by the atrocity that happened in Srebrenica and eventually decided to do something. There was peace agreement signed, and one would hope that we would have our freedoms back. Unfortunately, what happened in Bosnia remains divided. Half the country is still run by the same people that have run the concentration camps, and they put my dad in concentration camp and my brother. And they're still wanting to divide Bosnia in two. They still want to join Serbia. They do not even recognize Bosnia as an independent country. And this is all allowed by the international institutions. And we can't continue to reward war criminals. We cannot reward the crime. We can see what's happened with Ukraine, and they've used a great example of Bosnia. They probably hope to get half the Ukraine. It would be wrong. We cannot have wars. We cannot keep dividing countries. There's so much more to say, but I will stop at this point. I thank you for remembering and commemorating Holocaust and all the genocides that have happened since. But we do have to work harder. Having freedom isn't easy, but it is only as strong as we make it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Safet. And I think, like Janine's words earlier, your words will continue to resonate with all of those of us who have heard those words this morning. Thank you. Olivia, too, thank you very much for your words and your introduction. So I'm now going to welcome Nicole Pitar, a regional ambassador for the Holocaust Educational Trust, who is going to read for us the Statement of Commitment for Holocaust Memorial Day. Nicole.
We recognise that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning. We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's collective memory. We honour survivors still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice. We must make sure that the future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and all genocides. We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil. We recognize that humanity is still scared by the belief that race, religion, disability, or sexuality makes some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils. We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learned. We will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice, discrimination, and racism. We value a free, tolerant, and democratic society.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So I would now like to invite Rabbi Epstein and Rabbetzin Epstein to give their reflections and to recite the memorial prayer. After that, we will then invite Janine and Safet back to the stage to light the memorial candle, which we will follow with a minute's silence.
Thank you, Safet. That was emotional and poignant, and I don't know that many of us know the story, so thank you for sharing that. Karen, we so appreciate the work that you and the Holocaust Education Trust do throughout the United Kingdom, both in the classroom and in the field, so beautifully represented by our ambassadors, Francesca, Tommy, and Nicole. Olivia, thank you. Thank you for ensuring that the memory of the Holocaust is present in our conversation here in the UK. The Princess of Wales, Janine, thank you for sharing your story. You bared witness to the lives of those who came before you, and in turn, you've made us part of your story, and we are so grateful that you've shared that with us. And even years later, I can't imagine the pain. Thank you. The Princess of Wales has made us all aware of the importance of early childhood and the need to create stable and nurturing environments for the youngest members of our society. In turn, they will grow up, one hopes, whole and better able, not just to face the future, but to take responsibility for it. Countless studies have been done on what it takes to nurture a happy child and a strong family. Author Bruce Feiler says that regardless, the single most important thing a child needs and a family needs to be strong and healthy is a strong sense of their own story. Jews have always been storytellers and question askers and answer seekers. In fact, it is so much part of who we are and the tradition and Jewish law that we dedicate every year on Passover to tell the story of our people. It's the Jewish imperative to share our story. The older generations are our educators. The younger generations, we entrust to take the story of the past, instill it into the lessons of the present, and share it with future generations when we are gone. In this country, and in particularly in this city, thank you, Mayor Khan, for ensuring that this city is one that is vibrant and one that is full of our stories. We are the city with the most museums in all of Europe. We are one of the most multicultural cities in the world. We are a city of storytellers. We have blue plaques on our houses and we have subways that tell stories of our heroes. My wish on this Holocaust Memorial Day is that we are able to, as we have always done in the past, share our particular stories of pain, of suffering, of victimhood and ultimate survival, and at the same time deliver the universal message of resilience and hope and truth.
We remember, not as an event, but as a moral imperative. We don't do memory. Jews are history's memory. And may those who were murdered in the Holocaust and other genocides before and afterwards, may their memories be a blessing. I would ask you to please stand for the memorial prayer, which I will chant in its traditional tune, which we say at the end of our Lessons from Auschwitz program with the Holocaust Educational Trust at the end of the day, reflecting, thinking that it is memory that enables us to connect to the past and to ensure a better future for all. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein v'Amromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר רקיע מזהירים, לנשמות 6 מיליוני אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים, ילדים וילדות, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנחנקו, שנטבעו, ושנקברו חיים בידי הנאצים ועוזריהם יימח שמם וזכרם. באושוויץ, מיידנק, טרבלינקה, מאוטהאוזן, ובשאר מחנות השמדה, ומסרו את נפשם על קדושת השם. בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור מצרור החיים את נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. So, we are almost at the end of our ceremony. On behalf of all of us at City Hall, I have some thank yous I just wanted to say. I would like to give our thanks to Janine and Safet for their talks to us today, and as I said earlier, words which will resonate with us for a very, very long time. I'd like to thank also our Lessons from Auschwitz ambassadors. Thank you to the three of you on whose shoulders the retelling of these histories lies. We were honoured to hear from Rabbi and Rabbitzin Epstein. Thank you very much for your reflections and prayer. And thank you too to our event partners, Olivia Marks Waldman from the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust and Karen Pollock from the Holocaust Educational Trust, without whose kind and tireless cooperation this event would not have happened. And finally, our thanks to the Jewish Music Institute for their contribution to our event today, and particularly, of course, the presence of Josh and Rachel. So we are going to close now, actually, with some more music from Rachel and Josh. We'll sit and listen to that, and then after that, please join us outside for some light refreshments. Thank you.
Wollt ich gehad koje, wollt ich gelaufen in die Gassen, wollt ich geschrien Scholem, oi Scholem, 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 ja da 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 da, ja da 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 da, ja da da da. If my voice were louder, if my body stronger, I would tear through the streets, shouting peace, holy peace. Ilu hayali koach, hayiti tzabarechov, hayiti tzoreket shalom, 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 yada da 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 da.